everyone, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this podcast, we highly recommend Jane's book, Your Voice Speaks Volumes. I'm only on chapter 3, which is the one where men can make their voices sound sexy.
Oh, that
And
one.
I think
Yes.
Andrew had a question about that. Andrew, do you want to ask that question?
I'll edit it around because I had this whole thing planned.
Okay, go ahead.
That leads into what I think is the perfect podcast question. Something that Mike, Leo, and I are very curious about, and that is, why can't men make their voices sound sexy?
Yeah, this was so this was based on some research, again, not done by me, done by some other colleagues. But again, it's one of those things which is just really interesting. And it came to my attention because there's a show, actually, I'm not sure if they're broadcasting it anymore, but there's a show, one of these kind of comedy panel show things on British television called Duck Quacks Don't Echo. And so what they do is they give a statement, and then they get somebody to talk a bit about it. And then the panelists, who are all kind of comedians and personalities, have to kind of discuss this thing. And it's based on the premise that a duck quack doesn't echo. Don't ask me about that. I didn't watch that, so I can't tell you whether it's true or not. But anyway, so they got in touch with me because they found this paper that said men can't make their voices sound sexy, and they just wanted an expert, so a phonetician, to make a case for this, talk about this, and talk about why it was possibly true. And the research was based on the fact that they had a group of men and a group of women. They're all heterosexual, and they asked them to count to 1 to 10, I think it was, in a sort of normal way, which we call modal voice, just normally. And then they asked them to do it in a dominant way, a confident way, an intelligent way, and an attractive way, as if you were trying to attract a mate. So they asked them to do that. So count to 1 to 10. And obviously they need to choose something that is neutral from a language input point of view. So if you're saying, do you like chocolate, for example, some people find chocolate very sexy. So that's going to, and they gave them some notes. So, for the intelligent one, they said, as if you're presenting something at a academic conference and this sort of thing. So I think they got 20 men and 20 women to do this. And then they asked listeners to decide how dominant, confident, attractive, and what was the other one? Intelligent, the voices sounded. So they got them to rate them. And what they found was that women are able to make their voices or are judged when they're making their voices sound more sexy. When they were told to do this, they are judged to have a sexier voice than when they were doing modal voice, when they were just doing their normal voice. So whereas men were actually judged as less attractive when they did it. So that the men could make their voices sound more dominant, more confident, and more intelligent, but they couldn't make themselves sound sexy, whereas the women could make themselves sound more dominant, confident, intelligent, and sexy. But in some cases, it was less so, or for the other 3 parameters, it was less so than the men. But there was this effect. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting from the point of view of women are not judged to sound as authoritative or whatever as men, confident as men, even though they did make themselves, they were rated to sound more confident than the modal voice. But kind of 2 things arise from that. So one is the question of what were the women doing to make their voices sound more sexy? And the second thing, which Andrew was interested in, is why couldn't the men make themselves sound more sexy? And so for the women, they found that what the women tended to do was lower their voices and make them sound more breathy. And this kind of voice is considered to be very sexy and attractive. Wow. And, I mean, I've changed my accent a bit there as well. I've RP'd it up a little bit. But, even if I was doing it in a Margate type accent, it would still sound more sexy than my other accent. So they do that. And there's all sorts of things that are that kind of go with that, including that it sounds very calm, it sounds very nurturing. And so, it's something that mothers do to babies. A breathy voice sounds very kind of calming and soothing and so on. And so that's kind of taken as sounding sexy. And also I don't remember if it was this particular research or some other research that kind of allied those features of the voice with the health of the female. So if you had this kind of voice, then you sounded more healthy and physically attractive, and therefore you were more likely to produce strong offspring. Okay, right. So now we've gone there. The researchers said this is to do with evolution. It's actually that's the main thing. So if you're a man, from an evolutionary perspective, your main role is hunter-gatherer, protecting the family, seeing off others, whether it's through being clever or being strong, this sort of thing, dominant and so on. That is your role. Whereas from an evolutionary perspective, the female's role is to bear the children, raise the children, nurture the family. So you've got different sorts of roles going on there.
That's very interesting.
So men don't have any reason to make themselves sound sexy from a sexy voice point of view, because the things that the women are looking for from an evolutionary perspective is a man who can provide and protect. They're looking for that. So that was what the researchers put this down to. So interesting. I mean, it was just fascinating that if the men tried to make the voices sound sexy, they sounded less sexy. The women weren't interested in those voices. And this kind of matches things that you find on dating apps, where, women tend to go for men that have standard sounding type accents, because these men, they are considered, whether this is true or not, to be educated and intelligent and, able to earn money, that sort of thing. If you have one of these accents, more than if you have an accent from a more sort of rural area where you're not considered to be somebody who's going to bring in a lot of money, therefore you're less of interest. I mean, it's very, very transactional, and
wow.
it's that kind of thing. That's what they were putting it down to. Now, you do get men who have very deep voices, but as I was saying before, people assume that if you have a deep voice that you're physically quite strong and you're large. And that is something that's attractive to women from an evolutionary point of view. So, yeah, do you understand what I'm talking about? So all this stuff matches up.
Yeah, we all have faces for radio. I get it.
Exactly, yes. Good face for radio. Yeah. So, no, it was a really, really interesting piece of research. And, if you say this to people, they go, oh, no, of course, that's not, rubbish, that's rubbish. But actually, a lot of our responses go back to this sort of basic instinct. Oh God, that's another movie, which I didn't mean to be saying. But anyway, it goes back to your sort of basic needs as a human. And so, it's not the case that we don't get women going out there being very high flyers and so on, but it's less common than with men. And, all of these things are kind of linked up together. So the fact that if women speak in a particular way, they get much more criticism than if men speak in a particular way, for example. They get more criticism for things like creaky voice, this sort of voice like this, that kind of thing. That's criticized among women, but men do it as well, and they don't seem to get anything like as much criticism. And high rising terminal, where you go up at the end like that, that's also something that men and women do, but women get more criticism for it than men. So women are always at the kind of poor end of the stick, let's say, when it comes to being judged in terms of the way that they speak. And that's another thing that's in the book, looking at these sorts of things. And that's in that chapter, I think, actually. It talks about these kind of myths about language and tries to debunk some of them. I don't know how successful it is, but, you can only put the evidence out there.